My name is Naomi Thurman. I'm 32 years old, and just 15 days ago, I gave birth to my first son, the child I had dreamed of having, with the man I, until recently, believed was the love of my life. The pregnancy wasn't easy, but every contraction, every fear, every sleepless night was worth it the moment I heard his cry for the first time. I still have the stitches, and I still can't sit down comfortably, but I don't care. Bringing this little boy into the world was the greatest thing I've ever done. I look at him sleeping and feel like I could endure any physical pain, any exhaustion, just to watch him grow up healthy. What I never imagined was that the real pain, the kind that can't be healed with painkillers or rest, was about to begin. This wasn't a surprise, an accident, or something we decided on a whim. We had spent years dreaming of this child, talking about names, cribs, wall colors, and how we would raise him together. We went through fertility treatments, waited months, cried when it didn't happen, and laughed when the test finally came back positive. Marcus came with me to every ultrasound, kissed my belly every night, and promised me we'd be the best parents in the world. I felt our love grow stronger with every beat of our baby's heart. But now I understand that not everything planned with love is ultimately built on truth. In the final month of pregnancy, I started swelling up alarmingly. The doctors diagnosed me with preeclampsia, which scared me more than I let on. I gained 55 pounds. I couldn't sleep because of the lower back pain, and contractions started early. The labor was long, complicated, and filled with fear, with doctors rushing in and out, monitors beeping, and my heart on the verge of collapse. He was there, yes, but his face held more anxiety than tenderness, as if the whole experience was too much for him. Still, when our son was born and cried, I thought everything would be fine. Holding my baby was like touching heaven, a moment I wanted to freeze forever, even as exhaustion split me in two. I felt that finally, everything I had been through, the losses, the sleepless nights, the needles, the fears, made sense. Nothing mattered except that small body resting on mine, breathing with me. But that happiness lasted less than it should have, as if life had let me taste it for only a second before snatching it away. Something in Marcus's eyes that same day sent a chill down my spine that I chose to ignore. During the last month of my pregnancy, when I most needed him to hold me, to tell me I was still me and not just a swollen belly, I felt him pull away. He came home late, locked himself in the bathroom with his phone, avoided physical contact, and always claimed he was tired. I tried hard to justify him, thinking it was stress, that men also felt fear about becoming fathers. But the truth is, my heart was already silently breaking, and I didn't want to see it. The distance was real and palpable. I asked him over and over what was wrong, why he no longer looked at me the way he used to, why he was always rushing out or falling asleep. The answer was always the same, delivered in a flat tone. It's just work. I'm swamped. It'll pass. I clung to that phrase like a life raft, as if repeating it enough times would make it true. But with every passing day, his emotional absence grew heavier, more obvious, and more cruel. It wasn't work, and I was starting to know it, even though I didn't want to name it out loud. Even though I repeated to myself that it was just stress and that everything would be fine once we settled in as a family, something inside me wouldn't calm down. There were furtive glances, new silences, a coldness that hadn't existed before, as if I had become a nuisance. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I tucked my doubts away like broken glass in my pockets, afraid they would cut me. But I couldn't ignore how I felt anymore. My intuition was screaming, and I was silencing it with forced affection. I started living with a broken smile on my face and my soul full of questions. One average night, with the baby finally asleep after several hours of crying, I decided to take a quick shower to wash away the back pain and the soreness of cracked nipples. I dragged myself into the bathroom, feeling more exhausted than feminine, more mother than woman. The steam clouded my thoughts, and for a few minutes I felt invisible, alone, and calm. Stepping out, Wrapped in a towel, I felt something strange in the air, as if someone had invaded my space without making a sound. The door was slightly ajar, and his shadowy figure was there, phone in hand. I froze. He was holding his phone, pointed directly at me. Although he quickly tried to hide it, it was too late. I saw it. My reaction was automatic, instinctive. I gripped the towel tighter, feeling heat rush to my face, not from modesty, but from distrust. I didn't understand what he was doing, or why he felt the need to photograph me without my knowledge in such a vulnerable moment. He mumbled something without letting go of the phone, and his nervous smile hurt more than any insult. That 1 second changed everything, though I didn't fully grasp it yet. I didn't say anything immediately. I walked past him, and the air between us felt dense and unbreathable. I went to the bedroom and locked myself in for a moment, my heart pounding so hard my ears ached. Why did he need a picture like that? For what purpose? Who was he? I looked in the mirror now and didn't recognize myself. My body changed, my face exhausted, and a doubt sowing inside me like a poisonous seed. When I finally asked him what he was doing, he answered as if it were no big deal, as if I were overreacting. I just wanted a picture of you to remember what you look like, now that we can't have intimacy. He said it without shame, as if it were a romantic gesture, a kind of misguided affection. I didn't know whether to cry or scream, so I simply told him to delete the photo. He agreed without resistance, with the calm of someone who already had another lie prepared. But something inside me no longer entirely believed him. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just repeated in a firm voice that he needed to delete those photos in front of me, that I didn't find what he had done funny or normal. He pretended to be offended, putting on a victim face, as if I were just being hormonal. He repeated that he would do it, no problem. He took the phone, made a few quick gestures, and showed me the empty gallery as proof. But it was all too easy, too perfect, as if he knew exactly what to do to placate me without actually deleting anything. And I was left with that suspicion stuck in my chest like a splinter. That night, when I lay down, he was already fast asleep beside me, but I couldn't close my eyes. Every time I blinked, I saw his face with the phone, his trembling hand, his lie disguised as normalcy. Something in me knew he wasn't telling me the whole truth, that there was much more behind that photo. I felt exposed, betrayed in a new way that was difficult to explain. It was as if my privacy no longer belonged to me. I tried to sleep, tried to think of something else, but my mind replayed the scene over and over like a non-stop movie. The gesture of his hand, his nervous expression, the click of the phone, his absurd explanation. It all mixed with the baby's cries and my still aching body. I felt like I was losing my mind, that I needed answers, but I didn't know how to get them without starting a war at home. The worst part was that I had no one to tell this to without feeling ashamed. He was my husband, and yet I felt violated, as if by a stranger. The next day, when he got in the shower, something inside me clicked with a strength I hadn't expected. I went straight to his phone, my hands freezing cold, and my heart hammering against my chest like a drum. I knew his passcode. I had seen him use it 1,000 times, but my fingers trembled as I typed it in. It felt like crossing a line you can never uncross. But I did it because I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt more than I could bear. I went into the gallery first, looking for the photos, but they weren't there, not in the trash, nor in hidden folders. Then I opened his messages, not quite sure what I expected to find, but knowing that if I was looking, it was because I already suspected. There were empty conversations, others deleted, but one group, in particular, caught my eye. A group of friends with a joke name and lots of emojis. When I opened it, what I saw stole my breath. The air stopped circulating in my body. There they were, unfiltered and undisguised, the photos he had taken of me coming out of the shower, completely undressed, my body changed by pregnancy, turned into an object of ridicule. He had sent them to that group as if I were a joke, an old trophy, a laugh among his buddies. I felt a surge of heat up my back, a rage so strong it made me dizzy. What was mine, intimate, private, had been shared without my consent, as if it were worthless. In that moment, I knew something had broken forever. Right beneath the photo was his message. Look how fat she got after the baby. As if bringing his son into the world was something to be mocked. As if my body, worn out by the effort, was now only a source of contempt. It hurt more because it came from him, the man who claimed to love me, who swore his unconditional support. Seeing those words written down broke me in places where I had never felt fragile before. It was no longer sadness. It was humiliation. But the worst was continuing to read. I shouldn't have, but I couldn't stop, like someone who sees an accident coming and can't look away. Every word written by his friends was like a stone against my dignity. And among the comments, there was one that changed everything, that made me understand that the betrayal was not just emotional or digital. He hadn't just ridiculed me, he had lied to me on another, much crueler level. One of his friends responded with a message that left me ice cold. Real heavy. Good thing you've got that prime, light-skinned meat to eat. Carly. That name appeared like a bomb in my mind. She wasn't a friend of mine or a family member. She was a co-worker of his, someone I had barely heard him mention. Someone who now suddenly had a proper name tied to his infidelity. It was no longer just a suspicion. It was real. I read that message over and over, trying to find another interpretation and escape, something that would make it less definitive, less devastating, but there was none. Only the need to confront the obvious remained. He had betrayed me, exposed me, and was laughing at me behind my back with another woman. I collapsed in silence. No shouts, no tears yet, as if my soul had shattered onto the floor. It wasn't sadness, it was decomposition. I didn't cry or scream. I just did what my survival instinct dictated. I took screenshots of everything, one by one, with cold hands and steady fingers. I saved every image, every word, every proof of his betrayal, like someone documenting a crime. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for myself, so I could never doubt what I had seen, so no one could call me dramatic. I wanted to hold the truth in my hands, no matter how much it hurt. I put the phone back exactly where it was, with the same battery percentage, the same apps open, as if I had never touched it. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath, fighting off the nausea, the trembling, the emptiness. I didn't want to alert him. I had to keep watching in silence, coldly, no matter how much I was breaking inside. That was the new game, pretend, while uncovering the full truth. That night, I lay next to him as if nothing had happened, pretending to be exhausted, hugging our baby with a tenderness that broke my soul. I didn't sleep for a minute. I listened to him breathe easily, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I felt like a stranger in my own bed, my own house, my own life, and yet I forced myself to smile at him in the morning as if I knew nothing. The following days, I devoted myself to observing everything with surgical attention, his schedules, his gestures, his calls, his mood swings. I no longer asked him anything. I no longer needed answers because I was collecting them myself, piece by piece. Every time he said, "I'll be home late," or "It's just a meeting," I made a mental note. I had become an audience member in my own marriage, waiting for the next act of his lie. And the more silent I became, the clearer everything appeared. Carly. That name began to resonate everywhere, as if she had been invisible before and now shone with her own light. I remembered he'd once mentioned her in passing, a very efficient coworker, he'd said, as if it were meaningless. But now her name carried weight, a face, an intention. I went to social media, searched for her, observed her profile, and everything clicked with a precision that made my chest ache. I started looking backward with new eyes, mentally reviewing every day of the last month, every time he claimed to have a meeting, every supposed quick work trip. In all those days, there was always a detail that now seemed suspicious. The phone turned off, the clothes too carefully put together, the lack of an office smell. Carly was always there between the lines, hidden behind carefully repeated excuses. I realized the betrayal had been breathing under my roof for weeks without me knowing. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise suspicion. I just followed his routine from the shadows, like a stranger living in his house. I checked his notifications when he showered, noted times, and mentally recorded the names he mentioned. I pretended not to hear when he spoke softly on the phone, but I heard everything. It was a silent investigation, made up of tiny details that, when added up, formed a truth impossible to deny. One afternoon, I saw a text that left no room for doubt. "Tomorrow, at the usual hotel," written by him, and replied to with, "Yes, my love," by Carly. I read it without breathing, without blinking, as if the world had frozen around me. The lie was no longer an intuition or a suspicion. It was a certainty written in his own words. I felt rage, yes, but also a bitter relief. I finally had the whole truth, and with the truth in my hand, all that was left was to decide what to do with it. I didn't act rashly. I saved that message like a poisonous relic and spent the entire day as if nothing had happened. But inside, my blood was boiling, the humiliation burned, and my gut was churning. That evening, as he was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, living in his perfect lie, I knew I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I approached him slowly, looked him in the eyes for the first time in weeks, and said, "How long have you been seeing Carly?" It took him half a second to react, but it was enough to give him away. He looked at me with feigned surprise, put the knife down on the board and said, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy, Naomi? You're honestly making things up." He used that condescending voice cowards use to invalidate reality. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze with the full weight of what I knew, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He had no escape. I watched him surrender in his expression, his shoulders dropping, a long sigh, as if he could finally stop pretending. "Yes, I'm with Carly," he blurted out, no hedging, no embellishment, like someone admitting something that weighed on him more from the effort of hiding it than from the act itself. I stood still, no tears, just an internal coldness that froze me to the core. In that moment, I understood that I was no longer his wife, just the memory of what he once wanted to have. And as if the confession wasn't enough, he added with a coldness that pierced me, "I needed it. You just don't attract me like you used to. Plus, we couldn't do anything during the postpartum period." There was no guilt in his tone, only selfishness disguised as logic. He justified his betrayal with my body, which was broken from giving birth to our son, as if the sacrifice of labor was an offense to his desire. I felt used, abandoned, and blamed for something that deserved no judgment. It was violence, but spoken with soft words. I didn't know how to keep breathing after that. The walls seemed to close in, the floor to disappear beneath my feet, and I stood there, trying not to fall in front of him. I didn't cry for him. I cried for myself, for everything I had endured, believing that love was enough. I saw myself reflected in the window and didn't recognize the woman looking back at me, broken, invisible, forgotten. I understood there was nothing left to save. I didn't scream, I didn't throw dishes, I didn't make a scene. I just looked at him with the calmness of someone who has crossed the limit of pain and said, "I want a divorce." His face changed immediately, as if he hadn't expected me to have that strength, as if he wanted me to be weak forever. But I had already died inside, and only the reconstruction remained. I turned, picked up the baby who was sleeping in his crib, and knew it was the beginning of a new life. From that moment on, he stopped being a father. He didn't ask about the baby, didn't ask to see him, didn't offer help, as if the child was also part of the problem. He erased himself. He vanished from his son's life as if he had never wanted him, as if he hadn't dreamed of that child with me. I saw in his actions a cruelty that hurt more than any infidelity. He didn't just betray me, he betrayed his own son. After the divorce, he never looked back. There were no calls, no texts, not even an attempt to know if his son needed anything. He paid the minimum child support required by the state, without emotion, like someone settling a negligible debt. I was left alone with a newborn and a shattered heart, wondering how anyone could detach themselves from what they had created. But I didn't have time for laments. My son depended on me. I packed my bags with tears in my eyes, placing in boxes not just clothes and toys, but also the remnants of a home that no longer existed. I moved back into my mother's house in the suburbs, my head bowed, feeling like a failure, as if the blame was also mine for not seeing it coming. Every step out of that house was a step away from humiliation, but also away from what I thought was my life. It was grief, but without a coffin, and yet I had to keep going. My mother welcomed me with open arms, asking no questions, offering no reproaches, just a warm silence that held me when I could no longer stand. In her house, I slept a little more soundly, knowing I wasn't completely alone. She helped me with the baby, brought me hot tea, and listened to me cry without judgment. That refuge was my salvation during the darkest days, because when a woman is broken, she needs another woman to remind her she can rebuild. The first few months were a mix of extreme exhaustion, sleepless nights, constant fear, and a sadness that wouldn't leave with the sun. Every diaper change, every feeding, every fever, I lived through it like a battle without reinforcements. Sometimes I felt like a robot, other times like a lioness, but never weak. I learned to do everything: care, soothe, plan, resist. It was the hardest year of my life, but also the bravest. When my son turned 10 months old, I found a new job at a small accounting firm with flexible hours and fair pay. My hands trembled on the first day, as if I had to learn how to be a different woman, a version of myself I didn't recognize. Re-entering the workforce was like coming out of a cave. My eyes ached, but I was also filling my lungs with air. I had lost so much, but I still had something unbreakable left: my dignity. And that propelled me forward. While I worked, my mother cared for my son with a devotion that couldn't be repaid with money. She bathed him, fed him, and rocked him to sleep, singing the same songs she used to sing to me as a child. Sometimes I would get home from work and find them both asleep on the sofa, and that restored my faith and tenderness. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to get back on my feet. She was my net, my silent partner, the grandmother who turned emptiness into home. One day, after climbing the stairs with the stroller and feeling like I couldn't take another step, I decided I had to regain my strength, not to please anyone, but to feel alive in my own body again. I joined the local Planet Fitness without expectations, with fear, even with shame. The first few weeks were hard. Everything hurt, and I felt ridiculous surrounded by mirrors. But every drop of sweat was a way of releasing the past. I started noticing small changes. I slept better, had more energy, and it was easier to smile. My body didn't go back to the way it was before, but I no longer needed it to. The important thing was that I felt strong, light, capable of standing without trembling. I lost weight, yes, but what I lost most was fear. And little by little, that started to show in my eyes. One morning, stepping out of the shower, I looked in the mirror and didn't drop my gaze as I used to. I stood there, observing my scars, my stretch marks, my new figure, and I smiled at myself. I was not the woman he had ridiculed in a photo. I was a woman rebuilt, brave, who had walked through hell with a baby in her arms and was still standing. And for the first time, I felt proud of myself, as if the universe couldn't stand for me to shine without him. He reappeared. He called me one afternoon with that sweet voice that used to charm me, asking how I was, saying he thought about us a lot. I knew from mutual acquaintances that he was still with Carly, but that didn't stop him from trying to return. He talked about mistakes, nostalgia, and second chances. But I was no longer that broken woman he could manipulate. The most surprising thing wasn't that he tried to come back, but the way he did it, as if nothing had happened, as if I should be grateful for his return. He spoke about us with a familiarity that no longer existed, ignoring all the pain he had caused. He even insinuated that Carly wasn't what he expected, as if that should matter to me. I listened to myself from the outside for a moment and felt secondhand embarrassment. Not for him, but for the woman who once believed his promises. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I answered with a serene coldness I didn't know I possessed. You no longer have power over me. It's over. It was like locking a door from the inside, with no possibility of it ever opening again. His silence on the other end of the phone confirmed that he hadn't expected that strength from me. But it was real. It wasn't pride. It was recovered dignity. I hung up without shaking. I remained silent for a few seconds, watching my son play on the floor with his blocks, oblivious to everything. And then I realized I didn't need vengeance, justice, or even an apology. What I needed, I already had. Peace. And in that peace, there was room for my mistakes, my scars, and my battles. But also, my courage had returned to be mine. He never called me again. He didn't wish his son a happy birthday. He didn't ask how he was. He made no effort to be part of his life. He vanished like a coward, like someone who abandons a story because they can no longer control it. And while it hurt for my son, it was also a relief, because I preferred his complete absence to a false presence 1,000 times over. We didn't deserve his scraps. I raised my son alone, and in that process, I also raised myself. I taught him by example, with consistency, with hugs that never fail, and I love yous that are never withdrawn in anger. I never spoke badly of his father, but I didn't lie either. I showed him that family is built on love, not appearances. And every time he smiled at me, I knew I was doing it right. Time doesn't heal everything, but it teaches you to breathe differently. When my son turned 5 years old, I was already a different woman, calmer, firmer, more aware of my worth. There were tough days, yes, but they no longer destroyed me. I learned to live without fear, without depending on anyone to feel complete. And while love wasn't my priority, I didn't reject it if it arrived with respect. It was at a PTA meeting at Oakwood Elementary, where parents were talking about field trips and bake sales, that I first saw Andre Hayes. His son was in the same class as mine, and he had a way of looking at me that didn't invade. It simply accompanied. We exchanged simple words, the teacher's name, dismissal time, a good morning without rushing. But there was something in his voice, in his calm presence that made me feel seen. And after so long, that was a gift. There were no fireworks or fairy tale promises, just coffee after school, unfiltered conversations, and a sense of peace that enveloped me when he was near. Andre didn't ask me to be someone else. He didn't want to save me. He just wanted to know me. And I, who had learned to build walls, started opening windows. Without realizing it, his company became a habit. He invited me to dinner one Friday night, and I accepted, my heart pounding like I was 15 again. My hands trembled as I put on makeup, as if the mirror wasn't used to seeing me so hopeful. At the restaurant, his gentleness was like a soft coat. No pressure, no hidden agendas. He listened attentively, without interrupting, without judging. And for the first time in years, I laughed genuinely. But the most beautiful thing was seeing how he treated my son, not forcing a bond, not trying to win anything over. They played together as if they had known each other forever, with a connection that was born naturally. My son hugged him one afternoon without anyone asking, and that made me cry silently in the kitchen because I understood that I wasn't the only one healing. He was too, and he deserved that as much as I did. Opening my heart again wasn't easy. I had wounds that still hurt to the touch, memories that returned without warning, and fears disguised as caution. But Andre never tried to force anything. He walked beside me with patience, letting me set the pace. He showed me that healthy love doesn't pressure. It accompanies. And little by little, I stopped protecting myself from love and started living it. Our relationship wasn't immediate or perfect, but it was real. We learned to share without invading, to respect each other's space, and to talk even when it hurt. Andre didn't come to fill a void. He came to build with me from what was already strong. With him, I discovered that a family isn't defined by blood, but by daily care. And for the first time, I felt like I had a true partner. I look in the mirror now, and I don't just see a woman who overcame betrayal. I see a mother who never gave up, a woman who chose to believe again. I no longer carry shame or resentment. What happened to me doesn't define me. What I did with it does. I am stronger, freer, and above all, more aware of what I deserve. I learned that true love never wounds, never ridicules, never betrays or silences. The love I deserve looks at me with respect, listens to me, waits for me, and values me. And above all, I learned that I don't need anyone to feel complete, but that sharing my life with someone who adds value is a privilege. I'm no longer looking for saviors. I saved myself, and no one can take that away from me. I look at my son and see a light in his eyes that wasn't there before, a peace born from the environment we built. I taught him with actions that respect is non-negotiable, that love begins with oneself, and that you should never stay where you are not valued. He is growing up knowing that his mother was brave, that she chose dignity over fear, and that fills me with pride more than anything else. I don't know the exact moment I stopped being a victim and started being the protagonist of my own life, but it happened. Maybe it was the night I slept without crying, or the day I said no without feeling guilt. What I do know is that I was reborn. From dirty ashes smelling of betrayal and fear, a new woman emerged, not perfect, but real, strong, and ready to never accept less than she deserves again. One day, without looking for it, I found that cruel photo in a forgotten folder on my phone. I looked at it with distance, like someone observing a stranger. Far from hurting me, it brought me tenderness, because that broken woman in the image didn't give up. She didn't completely break, and she saved me without knowing it. Because of her, I am who I am today. I deleted the photo without ceremony, not out of rage, but because it no longer had power over me. I didn't need proof or reminders. What I lived through was where it belonged, in the past. And by deleting that image, I felt like I was closing the last door that had been left ajar. Today, I live peacefully in a small house, full of laughter, toys, and sincere hugs. Andre and I aren't perfect, but we are a team. My son grows up surrounded by real love, the kind that doesn't hide or break with excuses, and I finally feel at home within myself. If I could talk to the Naomi who was silently crying while hugging her baby, I would tell her, hold on, not because he deserves it, but because you deserve it. You deserve to see the other side of the tunnel. You deserve to rebuild, to be reborn, to love, and to trust again. And above all, you deserve to never again doubt your strength. Sometimes people ask me if I still hold a grudge, or if I ever thought about getting revenge, about making him pay. The truth is, I don't. The pain he caused isn't erased, but I don't drag it around either. I learned that letting go isn't forgetting. It's deciding that something no longer deserves space in what I'm building. He was part of my history, but he doesn't write a single line anymore. Andre looks at me with a quiet admiration, without the need for empty flattery or grandiose promises. He knows what I lived through, what I overcame, and he has never tried to compete with any of it. He just takes care of me, and I, who once confused love with dependence, now recognize love in the small gestures, putting a blanket over me without saying anything, washing the dishes while I put our son to bed, respecting my silences. My son is growing up free, loved, and secure. He has never asked about his biological father, and I haven't forced that conversation either. I know the day will come, and when it does, I will be ready to answer with the truth, without hatred. I will tell him that I was strong, but also human, and that everything we did for the love of the future, not the past. Some nights when the house is quiet, I allow myself to cry. Not from sadness, but from gratitude, for not giving up, for choosing the longest but most dignified path, for every version of me that fell, crawled, and got up with a smudged face and a heart full of fear. That woman is still alive inside me, and I honor her memory. And that's how I end this story, which I didn't set out to write, but which needed to be told. Because there are many Naomis out there, holding themselves together in pieces, believing they can't take anymore. To them I say, yes you can. Not everything will be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. And when you can finally breathe without pain, you'll know that is also a form of victory. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.